Hello and welcome to the David Icke Connector videocast. Well, it's been the week that we've been told we should celebrate the Balfour Declaration, the 100th anniversary of the declaration by the British government that started the process that led to eventually the establishment of the State of Israel. But maybe there's a little bit more to know about the background to that pivotal point in the establishment of Israel in the land of Palestine. Now, when you first hear that the British Foreign Secretary, Lord Balfour, made a declaration, the Balfour Declaration, it has the feel of standing up in Parliament and making a declaration that the British government supports a Jewish homeland in what is now Israel and Palestine. But it wasn't like that. The Balfour Declaration, of course, was a letter, and who the letter was sent to is extremely relevant to the whole story. Um, the House of Rothschild has been central to the creation establishment of Israel and for the creation of the modern Zionist movement. And this is the declaration from Lord Balfour, and it's written to Lord Rothschild. No coincidence. It says, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. Note it says Jewish Zionist aspirations because there is this myth that Jewish people and Zionism are interchangeable. It's not true. There are many Jewish people that don't support Zionism. Zionism is not a race, if you like. It is a political philosophy and an ideology, which, like I say, in modern times has been driven by the House of Rothschild. And the letter goes on to say, His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object. And this next bit is a complete joke. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation, completely controlled by the House of Rothschild. Now, we are being asked, and indeed the British government through Theresa May is doing so, to celebrate this declaration from the British government that started the process that led to Israel, but celebrate it on the basis of one of its apparently key tenets has been completely and utterly ignored. That being, it's clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Now that has clearly happened on a monumental scale, and it's happening hour by hour by hour. So this is completely fraudulent in the sense that the deal was not kept by the treatment of Palestinians. Palestinians who were something like 90% of the population of that land. And here you have a British government in its stunning and predictable arrogance that can basically hand someone else's country to an outside group without even consulting the vastly greater population, 90% in Palestine, about giving their country away to someone else. Because that's what's happened. This whole nonsense about not prejudicing the rights of the population of Palestine at the time not only hasn't happened, it was never even planned to happen. But let's look at this declaration and the communication between Balfour and Rothschild from another perspective. Because, you know, as I have been going on and on and on about decade after decade, this world is not controlled and dictated by people in the seen. It's in the unseen that the real decisions are made, and the manipulation goes on that manipulates and dictates the direction of the world that we see. So there was a connection, a major connection, between Balfour and the recipient of the letter, Rothschild, and it's something called the Round Table Secret Society based in Britain. Now, this was created by the Rothschilds in the latter part of the 19th century, and its first head was Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes being the man who was an agent of the Rothschilds and plundered southern Africa and allowed the British Empire to take over southern Africa on behalf of the Rothschilds and to, of course, steal their resources, the diamonds and the gold, etc., and set the local population, the enslaved population of southern Africa, to work in the gold mines and the diamond mines on behalf of the Rothschilds via Cecil Rhodes. So he was a nice man, Cecil Rhodes, and he was the first head of this Round Table Secret Society. When he died, just after the turn of the 20th century, he was replaced as head of the Round Table by a guy called Lord Alfred Milner. He was a businessman. He was a colonial administrator, big-time British colonialist, and he was a member of the British War Cabinet in World War I. And he headed the Round Table as an agent of the Rothschilds at the time of the Balfour Declaration. And as I've explained in my books, this is one of them going back to 1994, and The Truth Shall Set You Free. I describe all this that I'm talking about now in detail and what actually happened. And this Round Table Secret Society went on to create other fronts for manipulation, like the Council on Foreign Relations in the United States, another one called the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, and the Club of Rome, which was created in the 60s specifically to exploit the environment to justify the transformation of global society, hence the global warming hoax. That's one of the major ways this was played out on the population. And so here we have the secret society connection between the sender and the receiver of the Balfour Declaration, because the Round Table was broken up into two groups. There was an inner group, like an inner circle, that knew the big picture, and there was an outer group, the circle of friends, that knew far less. This is the compartmentalized way that these secret societies operate. Well, it just so happens that Lord Balfour was an inner circle elite member of the Round Table Secret Society. And so the Balfour Declaration was actually a letter from an inner circle elite member of a secret society to Lord Rothschild, who was funding and driving and controlling the secret society and the House of Rothschild in general, not just him. This is what history doesn't tell you. But there was a guy called Carroll Quigley. He was a historian and a professor at Georgetown University. Actually, he taught Bill Clinton. And he was an insider, and he spilled the beans on all this. I've read his books a long time ago now. One's called Tragedy and Hope, and the other one's called The Anglo-American Establishment. And in these two books, he puts the 20th century into a totally different light, including the Balfour Declaration. Now, what happened next, the Balfour Declaration in November 1917, 2 years later, we had the Versailles Peace Conference at the end of the First World War. This is when the leaders of the victorious countries, led by Britain, America, they met at Versailles in France to decide what would happen as a result of the war, what would happen to Germany. And they were advised, as I detail in that book, these leaders were advised by an array of people who were just agents and operatives for the House of Rothschild. Alfred Milner of the Round Table was among them. And they did two things relevant to this. First of all, they agreed, like the British government, that they would support a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And secondly, they made decisions about reparations for Germany as a result of the First World War that was so undeliverable, they were so impossible to meet, that Germany fell into total economic chaos and catastrophe. And that led directly to the political environment that allowed Hitler and the Nazis to come to power and do what they did in Nazi Germany, not least to Jewish people and others too. So that's some of the background to the Balfour Declaration that you won't read in many other places. And indeed, that's a kind of common theme here. You cannot have an open debate about the history, the background, and the behavior of Israel because you're called anti-Semitic, which is a complete misnomer. It means anti-Arab, really, because it's a language group called the Semitic languages, overwhelmingly Arabic. And even with this Balfour Declaration, opposition and other voices systematically have to be silenced. I mean, they don't know any other way. And I just wonder, when you have such an obsession with silencing criticism of any kind of Israel, what they've got to hide. That's a rhetorical question, by the way. And so we've had this story in the run-up to this Balfour 100th anniversary. Transport for London bans ads displaying Palestinian objections to Balfour Declaration. Adverts highlighting Palestinian objections to the Balfour Declaration of 1917, when Britain promised to establish a Jewish national home in Palestine, have been blocked by Transport for London on the grounds that the issue is politically controversial. Nonsense. It's censorship. What you call controversial, others rightly call open debate and the right to an opinion. So, we've had this dinner of celebration this week when Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, headed for London to have this celebratory Balfour Declaration dinner with Theresa May, the British Prime Minister. And they couldn't even leave it alone then. This is Theresa May speaking at the dinner. There is today a new and pernicious form of anti-Semitism which uses criticism of the actions of the Israel government as a despicable justification for questioning the very right of Israel to exist. This is abhorrent and we will not stand for it. Oh, Macron in France, the Rothschild president of France, used to work for him, has said pretty much the same. So what we're seeing is that history is being distorted, present day happenings are being distorted and being suppressed by the increasing, and my goodness me, it is increasing efforts to silence anyone with a different opinion to that of Israel, and also to claim that criticism of or questioning of a country, of a regime in a country, is somehow racist. It's not, of course, and it is another, of course, simply to justify censorship. So, we don't do censorship here. So let's have a look then at what we're supposed to be celebrating this week in this 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. This is only a partial list, but you'll get the picture. We're being asked to celebrate, number one, the fact that the House of Rothschild, as part of a much greater global agenda, essentially created modern Zionism and thus set about creating, successfully, the State of Israel so it could manipulate and destabilize the Middle East ongoing, brackets, achieved. We're being asked to celebrate, number two, that the Rothschilds secured official support for the Balfour Declaration from the then powerful and very influential British government for a Jewish homeland in what is or was Palestine, and of course the Palestinians claim still is. And in doing so, they did not secure or even ask for the support against not just the opposition of the Arab people of Palestine to this, but also they didn't ask the support, and they certainly wouldn't have got it from most of them, of the Jewish minority in Palestine. At that point, before this declaration and all that followed, Arab people and the small minority of Jewish people in Palestine were getting on fine. They were living together, and it was one country, if you like, and they were just getting on. Everything was fine. The minority Jewish people in Palestine, or great amounts of them, didn't want this great influx from Europe that changed their lives as it dramatically changed the lives of the Palestinians they were living in harmony with. We're being asked to celebrate that T.E. Lawrence, who of course is better known because of the film as Lawrence of Arabia, a military intelligence agent for Britain, helped to con the Arabic people of Palestine into removing the Islamic Ottoman Empire based in Turkey, to remove their control of Palestine in what was called the Arab Revolt. This was in the latter years of the First World War. And the con was that Lawrence and the British through him and others said that if you support us, the British, in removing Ottoman Empire control from your land, you will get independence afterwards. The British government and their agent knew that that land was designated for someone else. So, the Arab revolt removed the Ottoman Empire, and then, as the years unfolded, independence for Palestinians for doing that became domination by an outside force coming in from Europe, and the British knew that all along. You can trust the British just like you can trust American governments. Anything they say is true. Well, if you invert that, it's true. Another point of celebration this week, we are told, that after World War II, the Rothschild networks arranged for the relocation of great numbers of Jewish people out of Germany to settle in Palestine and take over another people's land. If anyone else did that, they'd send the boys in. But no, this is all fine, apparently, and we should celebrate it. We are asked to celebrate that Zionist terror groups like Irgun and the Stern Gang terrorized the Arab population of Palestine so comprehensively with their extraordinary violence that something like, at least, and the figure is said to be higher by many others, but at least 700 to 750,000 Arab people were forced to flee Palestine in terror, never to be allowed to return. So they're in a state of ongoing, a state of being a refugee from their own land. They were forced to flee their land because of the violence of Israeli terrorist groups like Irgun and the Stern Gang. And future Israeli prime ministers like Begin and Shamir were members of these terrorist abominations, who then came to power as prime ministers and started condemning terrorism. Yes, we should celebrate that. Round of applause. Something else to celebrate. That the Rothschild Zionists coming in from Europe, through still more military force and terror, given increasingly over the years state-of-the-art weapons by America and Britain and others, have continued to steal more and more Palestinian land in illegally occupied areas like the West Bank, and continually push out the Palestinian population, even today, from the land that they illegally occupy, the Israelis illegally occupy, so that more and more Jewish settlements can just steal the land. It's been an ongoing theme from the start of stealing land from other people. And they want it all. That's the truth. And also this ongoing violence and apartheid against the Palestinians has created, yes, an apartheid state in Israel, in which non-Jewish people are not treated in the same way and given the same rights as Jewish people. There's a word for that: racism. But that racism apparently only goes one way. So this gathering, further stealing and seizing of Palestinian land, which is all illegal, but who cares, says Israel? We do what we like. Rothschild is our daddy. This has increased dramatically again since the Zionist-owned Donald Trump came to power and basically gave him a blank check. That's why they're doing it more and more. Who's going to question him? Are we asked then to celebrate that Gaza is little more than an open-air prison camp, denied basic services and amenities, and periodically bombed from the sky with state-of-the-art weapons, supplied, many of them, with the funding of America, Britain, and the other Western moral countries? The last one of these mass bombings of the innocent in Gaza in 2014 killed at least 2,000 Palestinians, including 500 children. Anyone think that's a cause for celebration? I have my doubts myself. And let's celebrate then that the Palestinian population, all these years later, after the Balfour Declaration, is subject to Israeli military law, which denies them fundamental rights, while Israeli settlers in illegally occupied West Bank settlements are subject to Israeli civilian and the criminal legal system. They had a word for that in South Africa, apartheid. So we are asked to celebrate that since the turn of the millennium, at least 8,000 Palestinian children have been arrested and prosecuted in an Israeli military detention center system, notorious for the systematic ill treatment and torture of Palestinian children, according to Palestinian agencies. About 500 to 700 Palestinian children are arrested, detained, and prosecuted by the Israeli military court system each year. According to the organization Defense for Children International Palestine, quote, the majority of children are detained from their West Bank homes during the middle of the night by heavily armed Israeli soldiers. Several hours after their arrest, children arrive at an interrogation and detention center alone, sleep deprived and often bruised and scared. Interrogations tend to be coercive, including a variety of verbal abuse, threats, and physical violence that ultimately result in a confession. Unlike Israeli children living in illegal settlements in the West Bank, Palestinian children are not accompanied by a parent and are generally interrogated without the benefit of legal advice or being informed of their right to silence. They are overwhelmingly accused of throwing stones, an offence that can lead to a potential maximum sentence of 10 to 20 years, depending on the child's age. Many are given confessions to sign written in Hebrew, which they don't understand. Cause for celebration, Mrs. May? According to 2016 figures, 440 children under 18 are held in military detention, and almost 2.5 times the number imprisoned the year before. So it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We're being asked to celebrate that the tentacles of the Israeli regime and its Rothschild masters ensure enormous and fundamental influence in the politics of other countries, not least in the United States and the UK, thus fundamentally influencing the US and British foreign policy in terms of actions against Israeli targets in the Middle East. Think Iraq, think Syria. And you're going to see Lebanon come in at some point to be demonized. Iran, already. According to a leaked email from the former US Secretary of State Colin Powell, Secretary of State at the time of 9/11, Israel has hundreds of nuclear warheads pointing at Iran. These are nuclear warheads from the Israeli nuclear program that the Israelis won't even admit they have, though it's an open secret. And countries like America have a policy of never asking. But Iran, oh, they haven't got nuclear weapons. But oh, they've got a nuclear program. Danger to the world. One of the most trigger-happy countries on earth, Israel? No, don't ask. Why does this country, this sliver of land, have such global power to ensure that things like that happen? Answer that question, and a lot about the world will be answered. Zionism, this is another kind of point on my list to celebrate. Zionism has no historic right to the land of Israel. It's a made-up story. The vast majority, the overwhelming, virtually totality of Jewish people today don't go back to the biblical Israel. And who wrote those stories in the Bible anyway? They go back to a place called Khazaria in what is now part of Georgia, southern Russia, the Caucasus, and around the Black and Caspian Seas. That's where they come from. And it was in the land of Khazaria that the king had a mass conversion of the population in 740 AD to Judaism. He had his reasons for that, which I'll go into in the books. And so that was nothing to do with race. It was a conversion to a belief system and an ideology called Judaism. And then as the Khazaria Empire broke up, these Judaism worshipping Khazaria people moved up into Eastern Europe, settled there. Then they moved across into Western Europe, settled there. And they were the people that were in Germany when they were disgustingly, appallingly, unspeakably treated by the Nazis. The king of Khazaria was called the Kagan, which is why Kagan is such a common Jewish name today. And don't take my word for it. I would point you to two books by the Jewish historian Shlomo Sand, professor of history at Tel Aviv University. One is called The Invention of the Jewish People, and the other one is called The Invention of the Land of Israel. I've covered the story at some length in my own books as well, and other Jewish writers have highlighted this, among many others. So, we're being asked to celebrate that the Balfour Declaration led to the stealing of someone else's land, and basically an invasion. based on an historical hoax, really. Certainly an historical lie. And that is what the suppression of open debate and free discourse of information is designed to stop. That's why Zionism has this extraordinary network of attack dog groups, hate groups actually, because they're trying to get the population to hate their targets. That's why they have such a large and sophisticated network whose goal is to suppress information that would challenge the official story about Israel, its history, and right to present day. And Netanyahu said at this dinner with Theresa May that Israel was committed to peace and that the Palestinians should finally accept the Jewish national home and finally accept the Jewish state. Well, first of all, the Jewish national home is not has no basis in history, if the truth be told. And to accept the Jewish state, why not the Israeli state with all people equally included? No, Jewish state. And these are the people that go on, use it as a weapon of silencing people, of silencing criticism. They go on about racism. And Netanyahu said, and when they do accept the Jewish state, the road to peace will be infinitely closer. In my opinion, peace will be achievable. Well, that's not the idea. It was never the idea. The idea was to take it all. And that's what they're doing now. 100 years after the Balfour Declaration, after we've reached the consequences that it eventually led to, we desperately need certainly open debate, but also some maturity and seeing things as they are and not as they were and as they different people would like them to be. So Israel now clearly has a lot of Jewish people. And saying, get out, disappear, is not a credible option, not in my opinion. But if we are going to see a state of peace and harmony amid this catastrophe that's unfolded since Balfour, then any agreement has got to be based on justice, on fairness, and on equal rights in every way to everyone who lives in that land. Because without that, how can there be any celebration? How can you celebrate an apartheid state in which one group dictates everything about the other group and continually steals even more of its land? We want peace, Mr. Netanyahu. The last thing you bloody want. You want control of everything. And if this 100th anniversary of Balfour is to potentially celebrate anything, and what this point of history, this 100th anniversary, should have been is to use it as a focus to stop having one group of people impose their will mercilessly, militarily, upon another, and use it as the foundation to say, look, we're treating people like that as gods. We need another way. And that is a situation where the Palestinian population have equal rights to the Jewish population. Equal justice, equal fairness, equality in every way. And if they want to have their own country, which they control, then that surely is the least that can be offered in the light of a process in which Balfour was such a pivotal point, in which a population from outside of someone else's land came in and just stole it, in effect, took it over by force, by violence. Is there no compassion? Is there no sense of decency that says, let's try to put that right as best we can in the circumstances we have? Okay, this is your land to do with what you will. And you just accept this is our land and we'll run this. But there are no compromises based on justice and peace and fairness and putting right the ills and appalling happenings of history. Instead, it's just go on stealing, go on taking, go on occupying until there's nothing left for Palestinians at all. And that has been the goal from day one. And that's why there is nothing to celebrate about the Balfour Declaration until the day that justice prevails. And I, for one, I'm not holding my breath.